Yeah.
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
Well, I was trying to get a train of thought, and I was thinking going back to the leadership contest that Sunak lost first time round. And after that, he was very quiet. The press weren't interested in him anyway.
No?
But he didn't pack his bags. He didn't use his green card. He didn't say, that's me out of politics.
I think he's handed in, he's given back his green card, I think. Just,
he's already, he's
just to be a pedant.
Yeah.
Right, fair enough. But he obviously he was very quiet, under the radar for lots of reasons, and obviously having said what he said in the hustings and predicted what would happen, must have been sitting down doing the sums in advance of the crash that was about to come.
Yeah,
and now that he's seen the reaction of that, both in the markets and also in the population, the wider population and the wider world, then that has to change his position and his thought processes from when he might have won it first time round. So how does he approach that? Does he, having absorbed all that?
Well, I mean, listen, it is tempting, of course, to portray the Conservative Party membership as too racist to countenance a brown-skinned leader, a brown-skinned prime minister. But you possibly estimate the lure of empty promises, the lure of seductive lies. That's what Truss learnt from Johnson. What the mini-budget proved is that she actually believed the lies herself, which I don't think Johnson ever did. That would probably be the key difference between Johnson and Truss. So she just marched around the country promising people tax cuts, promising relatively wealthy people tax cuts. And I think that was probably more seductive than her Caucasian complexion.
Oh, yes. But Sunak had 50 days to absorb the impact of that.
No, I'm not disputing that bit of it. I would love to know what he said to his wife on the night of the mini-budget. I would love to know whether he actually said, start the clock, darling, we're going to have a go.
He literally predicted what was going to happen.
I know he did.
He said it in the last hustings. Borrowing, the markets need to know that you're going to pay the money back. If they don't know that you can pay the money back, then the cost of borrowing goes up. That's what. Those were his literal words. He said to Liz Truss,
so he must have known. He must have known that the Truss was probably going to fall apart, if not on quite such a spectacular scale. And then he's watching the markets and watching the pounds, and he's got that curious combination of some form of party loyalty, so he doesn't want it to be a complete disaster, personal ambition, so he does want it to be a complete disaster, and then patriotism, so he doesn't want it to be a complete disaster. But it was a complete disaster, and he did predict almost every syllable of it. So. I think you're right, Roddy, in that sense of him. I mean, sitting tight. I don't think there was a great clamour for his opinions on. Well, he could have gone on any television programme he wanted to reiterate what he'd said during the leadership campaign and just say, "I told you so." But he didn't.
Well, there were others who were very close to him. People like Mel Stride who went out and said it. Bob Neal went out and said it. They all said it, even as in the moments after that mini budget was delivered.
Yeah,
and now Rishi Sunak, I should just say, has left Buckingham Palace after his meeting with the Queen. I'll try and find out the room, and he's going.
Any comment on the car, the choice of car?
No, it's a Range Rover.
Is it the same Range Rover that Liz Truss would have travelled in?
Probably, yes.
Oh.
You don't get a new Range Rover just because you.
Just a new Lecton.
Just a new Lecton.
It's 11:45.
It's for just 12.
James O'Brien on LBC.
And we have pulled out of that break for reasons that I'm sure you can predict. Rishi Sunak is making his way up Downing Street as Prime Minister, approaching the lectern and addressing the nation.
Good morning. I've just been to Buckingham Palace and accepted His Majesty the King's invitation to form a government in his name. It is only right to explain why I am standing here as your new Prime Minister. Right now, our country is facing a profound economic crisis. The aftermath of COVID still lingers. Putin's war in Ukraine has destabilized energy markets and supply chains the world over. I want to pay tribute to my predecessor, Liz Truss. She was not wrong to want to improve growth in this country. It is a noble aim. And I admired her restlessness to create change. But some mistakes were made. not born of ill will or bad intentions. Quite the opposite, in fact. But mistakes nonetheless. And I have been elected as leader of my party and your Prime Minister, in part, to fix them. And that work begins immediately. I will place economic stability and confidence at the heart of this government's agenda. This will mean difficult decisions to come. But you saw me during COVID doing everything I could to protect people and businesses with schemes like furlough. There are always limits, more so now than ever. But I promise you this, I will bring that same compassion to the challenges we face today. The government I lead will not leave the next generation, your children and grandchildren, with a debt to settle that we were too weak to pay ourselves. I will unite our country, not with words, but with action. I will work day in and day out to deliver for you. This government will have integrity, professionalism, and accountability at every level. Trust is earned, and I will earn yours. I will always be grateful to Boris Johnson for his incredible achievements as Prime Minister, and I treasure his warmth and generosity of spirit. And I know he would agree that the mandate my party earned in 2019 is not the sole property of any one individual. It is a mandate that belongs to and unites all of us. And the heart of that mandate is our manifesto. I will deliver on its promise. A stronger NHS, better schools, safer streets, control of our borders, protecting our environment, supporting our armed forces, levelling up and building an economy that embraces the opportunities of Brexit, where businesses invest, innovate, and create jobs. I understand how difficult this moment is. After the billions of pounds it cost us to combat COVID, after all the dislocation that caused, in the midst of a terrible war that must be seen successfully to its conclusions, I fully appreciate how hard things are. And I understand too that I have work to do to restore trust after all that has happened. All I can say is that I am not daunted. I know the high office I have accepted, and I hope to live up to its demands. But when the opportunity to serve comes along, you cannot question the moment, only your willingness. So I stand here before you, ready to lead our country into the future, to put your needs above politics, to reach out and build a government that represents the very best traditions of my party. Together, we can achieve incredible things. We will create a future worthy of the sacrifices so many have made, and fill tomorrow and every day thereafter with hope. Thank you.
It's 11:56. Rishi Sunak concluding his speech there to the to the nation, effectively, turning around and walking back towards the door of 10 Downing Street, which will now, of course, be his front door. It was a good speech, that. I mean, I've got three obvious problems with it, the two of which are absolutely necessary. He has to pay some sort of tribute to his predecessors, but it was quite interesting that he chose to describe Liz Truss's policies as a mistake. He could have stayed quiet about them. I don't think he could have bigged them up or pretended that things had gone well, but he made it clear that part of his job is to fix some of the mess made by his immediate predecessor, and then warm words for the one before that, Boris Johnson, as well. I think that gets chalked up as absolutely necessary. And then, of course, still, and I've told you before, we're at least one, probably two, maybe more Conservative leaders away from reality recognition when it comes to Brexit, but that nod towards unleashing the benefits of Brexit was unfortunate. But that was a good speech. And in fact, that will have played very well, and regardless of whether you think this should or shouldn't matter, the fact of the matter is it does, that will play very well in financial circles. And indeed on the world stage, it does look as if after a bizarre period of British politics dating back to the middle of 2019 when Boris Johnson effectively overthrew Theresa May, it does look as if a grown-up is back in the building.
Yes, it was a good speech from Rishi Sunak, especially after yesterday where there were a few gremlins in the auto queue. But Rishi Sunak saying that basically the country now faced a profound economic crisis, and he pointed very knowingly to Liz Truss's mistakes, saying that he had been elected in part to fix them. He said that difficult decisions will need to be made, and of course that relates to spending cuts that we will presumably get in the fiscal statement on Monday. But he made the point of saying, and this is the conversation you were having earlier about being ideological or pragmatic, and trying to bring some pragmatism to his premiership, saying that he will bring the same compassion that he brought during the pandemic with the furlough scheme to helping people through the current economic crisis. He went on to say that trust has to be earned, and he will earn the country's trust. And he also was quite critical, I thought, of Boris Johnson. Okay, he had
yes.
Because he talked about bringing integrity and professionalism to government, but he also tried to draw a line, and this is the argument of Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nadine Dorries and Christopher Chope saying, well, actually, the 2019 election victory was Boris Johnson's mandate. It doesn't belong to anybody else, whether that's Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss. And Rishi Sunak saying, well, actually, the 2019 mandate was a Conservative mandate. It doesn't belong solely to Boris Johnson, and that's the argument around, of course, having a general election. That's not just to Labour, though. That is also, of course, to detractors, his own detractors within the Conservative Party, and trying to appear, finally, I think, as the statesman, saying, I know the high office I have accepted, and I hope to live up to its demands. A respect, of course, for the fact that he has now become Prime Minister, the highest office in the land, not since John Major, of course, as a leader Gordon Brown, made the transition from number 11 into number 10.
And as you say, the audiences are multiple, and they are all looking for different things. So, I mean, I don't know that many people would necessarily agree with him that the mandate delivered at the end of 2019 was for the Conservative Party. It was, unfortunately for him, built largely on Boris Johnson's lies. And so, you know, whether it's on Boris Johnson's electoral appeal or his lies, or actually, as I think the truth probably is, on both, his lies were his electoral appeal, then he's going to struggle to sell that. But he doesn't really need to in the short term.
And I think in the first instance, you're quite right to say that. I'm sure we will see the reaction from the markets in the coming hours will be positive to that speech. And as you say, the quote-unquote, the grown-ups are now firmly back in charge.
Well, I didn't quite say that. I said we have the impression that a grown-up is back in the building.
Okay.
It's 12 noon.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at midday, the new Prime Minister says economic stability and confidence will be at the heart of his government's agenda. Rishi Sunak has been giving a statement of his intentions outside number 10 Downing Street, insisting he's not daunted by the task ahead of him.
I will work day in and day out to deliver for you. This government will have integrity, professionalism, and accountability at every level. Trust is earned, and I will earn yours.
This morning, the outgoing Prime Minister made her final farewell address from the same spot. Liz Truss said it had been a huge honour to have led the country. She was in office for 7 weeks, but insists she achieved a lot.
In just a short period, this government has acted urgently and decisively on the side of hard-working families and businesses. We reversed the national insurance increase. We helped millions of households with their energy bills.
Forensic officers have cordoned off a house in Ilford in East London after 2 men were shot dead last night. A third, in his 30s, is critically injured in hospital. No one's been arrested. This man lives close by.
I live 5 doors away from it, so you can imagine how my family's feeling as well. Because considering I got a little brother as well, and it's half term, so he's meant to be out with his friends, but he's locked in the house now. So this.
The head of the European Commission has described the scale of the destruction in Ukraine as staggering. Ursula von der Leyen has addressed a conference in Berlin on Ukraine's reconstruction. Almost a third of Ukraine's power stations have reportedly been destroyed in a wave of Russian airstrikes over the past 10 days. HSBC has seen its quarterly profits increase by more than £880 million, mostly due to rising interest rates. The bank insists its mortgages remain affordable for most customers. In the city a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was trading down 43 points at 69.70. The pound buys $1.13 and €1.14. The weather, a few showers in the south and west, elsewhere mostly dry with sunny spells. Turning cloudier with outbreaks of rain across southwestern areas later, a high of 17 Celsius. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Holly Harris.
I love looking at your skyline on my way to work. Nights out that end with kebabs for breakfast. Seeing priceless art, but paying no price at all. Lazy Sundays in the park. And meeting all the different people who've made this place their home. Because London, I love you. Discover free activities. Search Make a Date with London.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It's 3 minutes after 12. Apologies to everybody waiting to chip in on your initial reactions to Rishi Sunak's elevation to Prime Minister. Jyoti and Emisu Lower and Kay and Amit and Susie. We will return to this, I promise. And there's a couple of names there I recognise as being particularly high-calibre contributors. But I do want to move on. And I want to move on to this. And again, I am conscious of the vaguer. Actually, it didn't really work that in the last. It's probably because I explained myself so well. The vaguer the question, oddly, the less satisfying the response is sometimes. You know, in order to get quality and quantity of contributions, you need to get quite a laser-focused question. And historically, when I ask a vaguer question, even if that's the one that interests me the most, it doesn't butter as many parsnips as a more specific question. But that was the opposite, wasn't it? Here, that was absolutely the case. I just distracted there by the thoughts on the speech and the criticism already of people suggesting that was quite a good speech. You don't have to like Rishi Sunak's record. You don't have to have much hope for his performance as Prime Minister. But if you assess it or judge it solely in the context of what he just did, it was a good speech. Sheila Fogarty points out on Twitter he didn't seem gleeful. It wasn't as if he was, excited. He understands the gravity of... the speech displayed or portrayed an understanding of the gravity of the job. He has to pay some sort of tribute to his predecessors, but he actually, as Theo Usherwood pointed out, he actually gave a bit of a kick to both of them. He pulled no particular punches about having the job, among many other things, of fixing Liz Truss's mistakes, and he pointed out, and Theo spotted this, not me, that the mandate is in this country a parliamentary democracy's mandate, and that is therefore for a parliamentary party. It's for the Conservatives. I think that would be harder to sell to an ambivalent audience than the first bit. The idea that Liz Truss made mistakes and he's going to have to fix them, you'd struggle to find anyone who'd argue with that. And while you would find people that agreed with him about the mandate being for the whole Conservative Party as opposed to for any one individual, I think we can probably all agree a heck of a lot of people voted Conservative in 2019 because they had fallen for Boris Johnson, either his bogus personality or his political lies, whichever it was. And a lot of them aren't even ready to admit that yet. They still think they were doing fine. So the only really trenchant criticism of that is the fact that economic growth, economic recovery, while still pretending that Brexit was a good idea, is counterintuitive. I mean, it's contradictory. It's cognitively dissonant. Again, as with Keir Starmer, I don't think he has any choice. A Conservative leader can't turn around at the moment and say, and we're going to undo a lot of the damage done by Brexit. Keir Starmer can kind of do that by saying we're going to make Brexit work. But Sunak's lines and Starmer's lines are actually pretty similar, albeit syntactically different. They're both, except that Starmer obviously knows that he's making the best of a bad lot, while Sunak is still pretending that he's reaping the benefits of a good lot. But the idea that it has to be improved. Think about the progress that represents. Both party leaders now describing Brexit in terms of something that even 6 years after the event is yet to deliver any of the benefits that it was supposed to deliver. So Starmer talks about making it work, which means it's currently broken. And Sunak talks about releasing or unleashing the benefits, which means that it's currently constipated. So the leader of the Labour Party thinks Brexit is broken, and the leader of the Conservative Party thinks that it's a victim of epic constipation. It's not exactly the lap of honour that you were getting under Boris Johnson and his acolytes, who still pretended that, quotes, getting it done, end quotes, was some sort of achievement, even as they sought to abandon the treaty upon which, quotes, getting it done, end quotes, depended before the ink was even dry on it. So what am I going to do? Okay, here's the thing. And again, it's a vague question, but it's a specific answer that I want. What should be at the very top of Rishi Sunak's to-do list? In terms of the first thing he could realistically boast about in Parliament, and remember, he'll be doing PMQs tomorrow. Liz Truss did 3 PMQs. That's an illuminating statistic, isn't it? 3 PMQs. Rishi Sunak will be doing his first tomorrow. What I want to hear. And also, I'll take this on board because, Peter, your language is a bit unpleasant and a bit unkind, but I don't think I have mentioned it. James, the fact that you're completely ignoring the huge rejoin protest in London on Saturday is frankly shameful. Please don't say you're going the same way as the BBC. I stopped listening to the BBC. Peter, I very rarely cover on Mondays or Tuesdays something that happened on Saturday. I do it. I mean, I promise you I do. Sometimes, it wasn't a deliberate decision. It wasn't a policy decision. Absolutely happy to say quite a lot of people, tens of thousands of people took to the streets calling for a rejoining of the European Union. You'd have to have a brain made of cotton wool balls to either hope or pretend that Brexit is going to be removed from the national conversation anytime soon. And we had 40 odd years of listening to racists and idiots bang on about why it would be a good idea to leave. So I think sensible and decent people talking about why it would be a good idea to rejoin do deserve attention. I apologise for that. A complete oversight, simply because politics is moving so quickly. No deliberate, nothing to read into that, Peter, but I hope you feel that your concerns have been addressed. I want next to turn your attention to this. And it's not, I don't want silly answers. I think you should call a general election. But listen to the question, okay? Rishi Sunak will be desperately hoping soon that he can stand up in Parliament and boast, that's not quite his style, but claim an achievement. He will be hoping that very soon he can stand up in Parliament and claim a real achievement. Not a bogus achievement. The words integrity and accountability popped up a lot in that speech, and they were directed entirely at Boris Johnson, I would argue, and at the status quo. So what would you personally suggest should be his first achievement to tick off? What should he be aiming for first? It's 10 minutes after 12. I've just been told Andrew Marr is on the line. Always a privilege. Oh, no, I beg your pardon, not quite, but we'll be speaking to Andrew Marr shortly. After that, I'll speak to you. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And I want to know what should be the very first thing Rishi Sunak should do. And obviously I want to know why, but something he will be able to stand up in Parliament and suggest constitutes a very real achievement. And to be honest with you, I haven't got an answer to that myself. I suspect it's going to be something to do with the cost of living crisis. The energy bills have at least been in part addressed until April of next year. But the cost of living crisis, what would that look like? Well, it's not going to look like a tax cut, I don't imagine, because it needs to be directed at the people who are most in need of help. So what would you put at the top of Rishi Sunak's to-do list? Not in the context of what you want to see, as in a general election or a resignation or whatever other hilarious contribution you're thinking of making, but in the context of a substantive and plausible achievement that he could realistically stand up in the House of Commons and claim. All right? Can we clear the switchboard of all the people waiting to talk to me about the immediate reaction to Rishi Sunak's elevation to Prime Minister, and free up phone lines now for suggestions about what should be at the very top of his to-do list? 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. It's 12 minutes after 12 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where Rishi Sunak has just delivered his first speech as Prime Minister. It is receiving relatively warm responses in most quarters, albeit with some words of caution and various caveats in many of them. But the sense that he is not the failings and the foibles of his two predecessors, notably absent from most of that speech. It's 12 minutes after 12. You're listening to... Are we going to have Andrew Marr to speak to before the break? Or should we go to the break? Or should we... No? Okay. So here are the numbers now. You will get through. I suppose I should come up with an answer of my own at this point. It would have to somehow involve people who are going to be struggling to choose between eating or heating in the coming days. And I don't know what the policy would look like. So I'm going to add an extra level to your homework and suggest that we will probably have to come up with what a policy would actually look like, not a magic wand. It's a big departure from Boris Johnson's ludicrous, meaningless, empty promises. This is a very simple question of if you want him to help X, how will he do it? What will that policy look like? What will that help look like? Let's go to the break a little early and then come back and take your calls.
LBC.
17 minutes after 12 is the time. At a day not far from here, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, will stand up in the House of Commons and say something that looks like an achievement. Not like a Boris Johnson achievement, which was usually nonsense, but a real achievement, something he can point to and say, and I got that done. What should be the first thing he aims to, quotes, get done? I don't know why I say quotes there. I'm quoting myself. That's ridiculous. What should be the top of his list as a meaningful, substantive achievement? Let's start with Bob, who's in Aberdeen. Bob, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
how's
Bob.
it going?
Pretty good.
So I'm a seasoned veteran in the energy industry. I've been working in the industry for over 30 years now. Still got plenty of my career left in me as well. But I think the top of Rishi Sunak's list should be to introduce a more substantive windfall tax on energy companies.
What's on the record with him?
So I know that he's obviously U-turned, because obviously initially he wasn't going to do it, and then under public pressure, from the likes of the opposition,
right,
and the Labour Party in Scotland as well, he was.
Well, I know Truss was very much opposed to it, but off the top of my head, I don't know what Sunak's position was.
Yeah, well, I think, as I say, I think he was strong-armed into introducing it, and I don't know if that's his view that it was the right thing to do at the time. I think he probably would have carried on regardless and allowed the oil and gas companies to keep creaming off humongous profits, whilst also...
So you're talking about the one back in May, the £15 billion package of support that would be part funded by a £5 billion windfall tax on energy companies. You're saying he should go in much harder on that?
I think he should go in harder.
Well, so did the head of Shell, didn't he? So did the head of Shell.
Yeah, exactly. And you're hearing about quarterly profits that are so hugely significant. And, there's a lot of posturing from the majors and the big companies about, we're all driven to a net zero future, lots of attendance at conferences and lots of pictures all over LinkedIn, of people attending this, that and the other, and we're driven to a net zero future, when in all honesty, they're rubbing their hands at the oil and gas licensing rounds, coming together so that they can continue to build, as they say, a more sustainable energy future.
Steals Keir Starmer's lunch a bit as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And what's sustainable about just horsing on with oil and gas with a view that, we need the extra investment so we can invest in hydrogen and carbon capture and offshore wind and do this, that and the other. Why were they not driven to do that more before, as well? If they were really cut to the bones and now they've...
Well, here's a question. Mm-hmm. How much of a line does Rishi Sunak draw under the last 3 years and indeed the last 45 days? My inkling at this point, and it's only just happened, is that it's actually quite a thick line. It is quite a profound departure from Johnson's sort of just clown car and Liz Truss's debacle. So you may not see him held hostage by what's gone before. And similarly, you can't really hold him responsible then for elements of what's gone before. You can hold him responsible for the things he was responsible for, but you have to imagine there was quite a lot he went along with that he wouldn't have done himself as Prime Minister.
Yeah, 100%. I think he does need to draw a line underneath it and then just really come out with something big like that, because I think that speaks to the vast majority. It maybe doesn't speak to a lot of people in my constituency and up here, but I would hasten to add that I think up here we're in a bit of a bubble, to be honest. I think driving around in big Chelsea tractors all around the town and this, that, and the other. And it's not the politics.
Some of them are EVs now. You can get an EV, a Chelsea tractor EV.
Yeah, Chelsea EV, absolutely.
You're in the industry, so how relevant is it that the price of oil, European gas price, is now coming right down? It's down to about $100 from $330. Does that shoot your fox a bit on a windfall tax? I don't have a full understanding of this issue.
I guess it does a little bit, but I mean, in the line of work that I'm in, I think that there's going to be a requirement for that line of work, regardless. But at the same time, I just feel a real objection to this whole we're driven to an energy transition future. We're all about net zero.
Okay.
But they're not really doing anything.
So there's two things there then. There's a windfall tax and a really meaningful commitment, which are both essentially Labour policies at the moment, aren't they? You have that entirely new state-owned energy company that Keir Starmer announced at a Labour Party conference. And that's not a reason why he can't do it. It'd take a bit of front, wouldn't it, to stand up and announce your first two major achievements as leader of the Conservative Party are to steal two massive policies from the Labour Party. But that's how it works quite often. I mean, it's on the list. Mark's in Leeds. Mark, hang on. A couple of people complaining that they can't get through. There are now 3 phone lines. I know things were very, very busy right at the outset, but we've now got 3 phone lines, including the one Bob's vacating. So don't text me to complain. Just get hit the numbers now and you'll have a better chance of getting through. 0345 6060 973. Mark's in Leeds. Mark, what would you like to say?
For me personally, social care would be one of the main things that needs attention. And when you may well remember Boris Johnson, when he was first elected in 2019, he stood at the lectern in Downing Street and said that he did have a plan to mend social care and all the problems throughout it.
He did.
And then we had the national insurance rise, which was supposedly to pay for social care as well as clearing the NHS backlog. That has been completely forgotten about now. So what is going to happen with social care and the problems throughout the NHS, which are partly certainly caused by social care not being available?
Oh, of course they are. I mean, it was a huge problem for Theresa May. It was a huge problem for Boris Johnson. I'm not going to defend him because I think he was an absolute meringue of a man as Prime Minister. But he, obviously, any plan he did have, and he probably didn't because he lied as easily as you and I breathe, but it would have been scuppered by COVID anyway, wouldn't it? So we have to recognise that. The increase in national insurance was supposed to address, once some of the holes dug by COVID had been filled, the increase in national insurance was supposed to specifically address. It was a bespoke levy designed to fund social care. I mean, what's he going to do with that? That would count as a win for you if he stood up in the House of Commons and said, we're reversing the reverse on national insurance.
It's not just myself personally.
No, I know. Sorry, I didn't mean to give that impression. It's everyone who needs social care, mate.
My situation, I have quite a high-level spinal injury, and I rely on carers to get me out of bed and help me with day-to-day living. In only the very recent future, 3 or 4 years ago, there were always people on job websites, Facebook, places like that, looking for jobs.
There were.
There are none now.
It's the other way around. There's 100,000 empty jobs, vacancies that people are trying to fill.
partly from leaving the European Union. Certainly we used to have quite a lot of Eastern Europeans in particular that worked in social care in this country.
Yes.
And my sister works in a care home in Cornwall, and they're constantly asking my sister to work extra shifts because they simply can't cover it.
Well, how do you fix a staffing crisis, though?
Well,
Immigration.
leaving the European Union is part of it.
Yeah.
The levels of funding throughout
Higher wages and immigration. The scale of the gaps, the scale of the holes in the workforce are so huge that they're going to end up giving almost every sector a special dispensation to bring in people, which makes us wonder. I mean, that means Suella Braverman can't be put back in the Home Office because she was somehow committed to the idea of creating growth without creating any new jobs.
And it's never ending, and the lack of spaces in care homes then leads to bed blocking in hospitals, and then problems in A&E, and that's why.
Absolutely, it's the mother of all It's the mother of all ripple effects. I need Theo back in the studio because I can't remember. I mean, is he going to? I can't remember where we are on national insurance. He could realistically undo what Liz Truss undid. So he was going to raise it. Wasn't that one of the bits that stayed in? Even after Jeremy Hunt got rid of everything else, wasn't the national insurance?
No, it's been scrapped completely.
Yes, I know, but the scrap stayed in. God, it's so hard to keep up. Scrapping Rishi Sunak's mooted rise in national insurance stayed in.
We do need a 360 degree.
So will he bring it back? I mean, theoretically, he has to, because circumstances are even worse than they were when he announced it. And then it got unannounced by Truss or Hunt.
He really should bring it back in because...
Yeah, he should. That's a really feasible thing to put at the top of the list of plausible achievements that he could be part of, except a lot of the Conservative Party wouldn't see it as an achievement. In fact, there you are, you've done it. You've highlighted precisely the problem he's got while we're all still feeling relatively encouraged by the tone and the timbre of his speech. The first problem he's got is that a relatively obvious win for him in the context of the country or the national interest would absolutely scare the horses in the context of the Conservative Party or his own base. Because, of course, they lapped up Liz Truss's promise to scrap it, to scrap the rise. They lapped it up. And there it is, in a nutshell, the problem that I have thus far failed to articulate all morning. And when I say plausible, Tom, rejoining the single market is obviously not going to fit that criteria, desirable though it may be for both the national interest and anybody who understands anything. Thank you, Mark. Billy's on the Isle of Wight. Billy, what would you like to say?
Hi, good afternoon, James. Pleasure to speak to you. I listen to you quite a lot.
Thank you.
I really think that what needs to happen is he needs to immediately announce how he's going to help the very poorest in society. I'm not talking about people that are just about getting by, people that are finding this a bit of a pinch, probably like you and I, but people that are at the very bottom of the socio-economic ladder, people that are literally deciding now more than ever, not that this has been happening for the last 8 years anyway, but literally now more than ever, whether to put the heating on or whether to cook dinner. And obviously in a lot of cases, because of this energy crisis, and it does stem from the energy crisis, but it stems from a lot of other areas as well as a result of the crisis. That does include making an announcement reassuring people like, I think you often say, Dorothy down the road, who can't work because she's physically unable to.
Or even people who are in work and just haven't got enough money left at the end of the month. There's no votes in that for him.
Well, there might not be, James, but you know what? And I didn't mention this before coming on, but I did in a way, actually. I sort of said that the one thing that makes me gag more than something that's going to affect myself is the idea that somebody who's worse off than myself is going to suffer and isn't going to be able to afford to...
And what would that look like? I mean, a rise in universal credit, an inter-index link rise in universal credit, most obviously. You just link universal credit to inflation. God, he's got a lot on his list, hasn't he? He's got a lot on his table. He's got a lot of tricky decisions to make where perhaps that conversation we've had about empathy is going to become more pertinent, and the less empathy he has, the less likely he is to do what you're calling for.
I think as well, though, what comes here as well is an element of realism. So I need to accept, and I think other people need to accept, that a little bit of money does need to come from somewhere. And I do feel, although I am feeling the pinch, maybe an extra £30 a month out of my pocket wouldn't be a huge noticeable difference.
So a tax rise to fund a universal credit these are not policies he could get past his own members, and that's where the disunity in the Conservative Party will. But just with the last call as well, Billy, that's where this is actually, I think, inevitably we're focusing on the events of today. But in terms of the road ahead, it's going to catch up with him very, very, very quickly, starting quite possibly tomorrow at PMQs. All the stuff that most of us now recognise needs to be done for the good of the country or for the benefit of the most vulnerable is the kind of stuff that a significant swathe of the Conservative Party, and a bigger swathe than ever before since Boris Johnson got rid of most MPs with a conscience back in 2019, or most MPs with a proper grasp of the facts, a significant swathe of the Conservative Party will be of the sort of red meat chomping tabloid view that if people don't need help, what was it Jake Berry said? Get a better job. If you haven't got enough money, just get a better job. As if it were that simple. So that yeah, again, this is very fruitful conversation, isn't it? But not exactly an uplifting one. Lottie Morley's here now with your headlines.
With James O'Brien.
12:34 is the time. We, you almost have to. I'd get whiplash if I was paying attention. Really, if I was concentrating slightly harder on Jacob Rees-Mogg's latest contortions, I'd probably get whiplash. Jacob Rees-Mogg has told the Daily Telegraph that he no longer believes Rishi Sunak is a socialist. That's something that he believed in July of this year, not of 1817. He no longer believes that Rishi Sunak is a socialist. He said he could never serve in Rishi Sunak's cabinet because he was a backstabber and he betrayed Boris Johnson. Absolute disloyalty, absolutely couldn't serve in it. Jacob Rees-Mogg, and that was in July of this year. He's told the Daily Telegraph this morning that he no longer believes Rishi Sunak is a socialist and would now serve in his cabinet. I'm very rarely lost for words. But my goodness me, if there were any individual who just embodies how, not the people that have led the corruption of the political discourse, not the individuals, because Johnson obviously is unique in the context of lying and smiling while he lied, but the people who went along with him, the people too stupid to understand the idiocy of Brexit. Rees-Mogg standing up in Dover and say, we're not going to introduce any checks because it would bankrupt us. It'd be so expensive. Having spent years telling you that we had to leave the European Union in order to control our borders. We can't possibly control our borders because it would actually be prohibitively expensive. Now, in the space of July, August, September, October, 3 months, it's gone from describing Rishi Sunak as a socialist who he could never serve to saying, I no longer believe he's a socialist and would now serve in his cabinet. Groucho Marx, I got principles, and if you don't like them, I got others. But because he delivers it all in that ludicrous accent, a certain type of Brit thinks it must be somehow sensible or even perhaps intelligent. The man, I mean, thick as mince would be doing a disservice to mince. And it's not the lack of intelligence. That's why you send your children to places like Eton so that they get taught to mask their ignorance, their lack of basic intelligence, and flourish regardless. But it's the moral corruption there. It's the utter absence of backbone or integrity or decency. Never mind the truly egregious comments about the people who died in Grenfell Tower or food banks, the proliferation of food banks. Sometimes it's the little things that highlight the true moral bankruptcy of a man. And there it is, back in July. It's as if he's telling you, don't listen, anything that comes out of my mouth is meaningless, hollow and devoid of moral worth. Because if it came out of my mouth yesterday, the polar opposite could come out of my mouth tomorrow. He also told them he was proud of his achievements as business secretary. Should we run through them now? Should we run through Jacob Rees-Mogg's achievements as... Well, we can't. We've got to run through his achievements as a Minister for Brexit Benefits first. Does anyone want to start? Keith, do you want to start? Should we just run through the list of the achievements of Jacob Rees-Mogg as a Minister for Brexit Benefits? And then that'll take us up to about 4 o'clock on Thursday. And we can start then with a list of his achievements that he's so proud of as business secretary. That's why Rishi Sunak, although he will be morally better than Boris Johnson, he will be cleaner, if you like, as the Financial Times have put it. The competence question is, I'm afraid, very much one for the ages. Let's go to Kenny, who's in Tarporley in Cheshire. Kenny, what would you put at the top of his inbox, the top of his to-do list?
Hi, James. I don't know. I mean, there's not much to do. I'm confused with Sunak, because when we were going through COVID, he was telling everybody that because the Conservatives have been so careful with everybody's money, this is why we can do the furlough. This is why we can do the grant system. This is why we can support people now. And he's now standing saying, COVID's left us with a hangover we need to pay back. Well,
I don't know if you're doing him justice there. He never really described it as in the way that I don't think he did. I could be wrong, but I don't think he was denying the size of the fiscal hit, the size of the financial hit.
He wasn't. But he was trying to say that we've been so careful with your money for the past 12 years.
I don't think he was, mate. Unless we've been watching different shows.
Well, it's possible. I mean, I've never liked politicians.
No, that's fair.
The problem I've got now is not only do I not like them, I don't trust them either.
Yeah.
I can live with not liking them. You don't have to like them.
But surely you didn't like them because you couldn't trust them. If you could trust them, you should like them a bit.
No, I didn't like them because they're not in the real world.
Oh, some of them are, man. Some of them are. Come on.
What, the ones sat in the back benches that never get a shout at the front?
There's some decent politicians around. I struggle to name any from the Conservative Party, but that's a relatively recent development. There used to be... I had an interesting exchange with Geoffrey Cox the other day, who was correcting a couple of points I'd levelled at him on Twitter, and I thought that was a civilised exchange at least. Well, but there are good people. Good people go into politics. It's so reductivist to think that they're all wrong-uns.
I think Brian Cox was more on the money in the interview. I mean, he's got it nailed.
Well, you're up to a point, Lord Copper. So, all right. So, in terms of his to-do list, what would be on it?
Well, he's got to undo what his predecessors done.
Yeah.
I mean,
and his predecessor undid what he was about to do. That's the madness of the moment, and they're all they're all part of the same party.
I mean, it seems like a lot of people are rejoicing now, but we're in for a hard time ahead.
I don't know if anyone's rejoicing. I feel a sense of relief that I'm not going to be lied to anymore through the teeth. There might be the traditional embellishments and exaggerations, but he's not going to stand there with a carrot in his hand and swear blind it's an apple like Boris Johnson would have done.
No. I mean, Rees-Mogg, he's a class act, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a truly despicable human being, actually. The more you think about it and the more you see the latest utter abandonment of what he insisted was a principled position just 3 months ago, the more you realise how these people are absolutely the emblems of what's been done to our country in the last 6 years. He shouldn't be allowed. He shouldn't be allowed near a car. Never mind a cabinet position.
He seems to be able to. He's like a middle feeder in a fish tank. He doesn't want to go at the top because you can only go at the bottom. So he just kind of floats along just underneath the surface, collecting his wages. Well,
I don't know. I mean, it's status, isn't it, with these people? And it's some sort of... I speak with a modicum of sympathy when I say there's a psychological trauma often attached to the schools that we went to and the personalities that you often have to adopt in order simply to survive. If you were being trained to run an empire, you have to have callousness praised and empathy excised. You have to be turned into someone who thinks he has a God-given right to lead and that the people that you're leading are somehow your inferiors. There's all sorts of things going on in the context of these sort of individuals. He's a particularly pungent example of it, though, and I'll be honest with you, he stretches any sympathy I have to breaking point. 12:42 is the time. Thank you, Kenny. Richard's in Romney. Richard, what would you like to say?
I'd like to say that really what we'd be looking for Rishi Sunak is an amount of honesty, and I think your previous caller spoke about trust. My priority would be the NHS, but he needs to be brave enough to say that if you want a health service that we all want to be proud of, it needs to be funded. And you can't do that from borrowing, and you can't do that from fantasy economics. It means that we're going to have to pay more taxes to fund it. And whilst that's unpopular, it's the only real way it's going to happen. Wow. It's no good us bagging our pots and pans outside our houses and saying what a fantastic institution it is if we're not willing to front up the money, put our hands in our pockets and make it happen.
But this is a recurring theme on the programme, and inevitably and significantly so, that is absolute kryptonite for the parliamentary party. Kryptonite for the membership and for the parliamentary party. It'd be like asking, I don't know, it'd be like asking me to do an ice dance with Jane Torville. It's just not possible. It would not be sustained. He cannot do that. Look what got Truss beat him by promising tax cuts.
Yeah, but we all see how that ended up, and at least we'd all say, at least he's being honest. At least he's not going to say to us, you can have this fantastic range of services. You haven't got to lay on a trolley for 18 hours in
He's
A&E.
talked more, and here I can remember his record. I can't quite remember it with specific regards to some of the other suggestions that have been made. But during the summer, when he was still Chancellor, he was talking about saving money. He was talking about waste and bureaucracy and charging people for missed appointments and having a task force to improve efficiency. He was not talking about raising taxes. Well, there's that national insurance rise that I think has got to come back, hasn't it? And that would address part of your proposal.
Yeah, there will be that. And I think, to be honest with you would hope that in this brief period of time that he's had to reconsider, he'd have actually had a Damascus conversion and thought about how people are desperate for reality, because we've seen no reality.
Yeah, but listen to the calls this hour. You could break them into two camps, 52%, 48%. 52% saying he's got to do more to help poor people, and 48% saying he's got to raise taxes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a scary thought. I mean, you can see the link between the two, but who are the people whose taxes are going to be raised? How many of us are there that think we could probably afford to pay a little bit more? I certainly should have not had that 45% cut taken away. Maybe he'll put that back. This is Theo Ushwood is with us. We'll talk. It's all right. We're going to take a quick breather and then come back. No, we're not expecting any cabinet appointments before 1 o'clock.
No, Rishi Sunak's just gone to his Parliament, and of course he'll do the sackings in his parliamentary office in the House of Commons, well away from the cameras.
He'll be very pleased to hear that Jacob Rees-Mogg no longer thinks he's a socialist and would be prepared to serve in his cabinet.
Yeah.
You can't rule it out.
Dream on.
Are you saying that on the record? We're still live. We're having too much fun in the studio.
No, I don't know. No,
I hope it's infectious.
A serious point. Sorry, there was no relish in my voice.
No,
I was just being
glee. That poor woman at the BBC.
No. Serious point. No glee, no relish. I don't think Jacob Rees-Mogg will be expecting a promotion.
No. So he'll go back to rocket science and brain surgery then.
The backbenchers.
Oh yeah.
Coming up at 1 on LBC, Sheila Fogarty.
Rishi Sunak says he'll fix Liz Truss's mistakes and serve with integrity. We now await his cabinet choices.
He's good, Theo Ushwood. It's not just scoffing, but audibly mocking the notion of Jacob Rees-Mogg actually getting a job in Rishi Sunak's cabinet after pirouetting between July of this year and this morning, from saying he's a socialist who I could never serve to saying I don't think he's a socialist anymore and I would serve in his cabinet if asked. Positively poo-pooing the prospect just 4 short minutes ago, Theo Ushwood.
And now we've had it confirmed from a source that Jacob Rees-Mogg, the business secretary, former Commons leader, has now left the government. And he is out.
So, I mean, how can any government function without his brilliance? Do you know, is he going to take the Brexit benefits with him? Or will he leave
former
them?
Brexit Opportunities Minister.
Yeah,
Sorry,
Brexit Opportunities Minister. Will he take all the Brexit opportunities that he identified with him? Or will he sort of leave them for the rest of us to finally discover?
No word on that, James.
Okay. I'll watch this space.
No word on that. But
anything else going on? Shall I take some calls? And then if something happens, you go, oh, like on a proper programme.
I'll just put my hand up.
No, make some noises. Like like on Soccer Saturday with Jeff Stelling.
Okay.
So you that's what we'll do it like. So I'll chat. I'm just doing the normal stuff, and then if something happens, and I'll go, I think there's been a goal at Brighton and Hove Albion, like that. Right. Rupert's in Bicester. Be warned, Rupert. This may end a little abruptly. What would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
Well, look, apart from uniting his party, I will be out in 45
he can't
days.
do that. He can't unite his party. How does he unite a party that contains Jacob Rees-Mogg and Tom Tugendhat? No. I mean, more united perhaps than it is at the moment is what he can aim for.
Well, that's the first biggest thing in the industry, isn't it?
Yes.
But the other thing, he needs a couple of easy wins, doesn't he? And surely one, in his position, with his background, has got to be a non-dom status. Ooh. I mean, that's just an easy win, isn't it?
Stealing Labour's lunch again. I mean, could he sell that, though, without being really hoisted by his own hypocrisy?
Oh, no. With his background, of course he can sell it. It's like that.
So in the space of a year, he goes from nodding along to his wife's use of a tax avoidance scheme to outlawing the same tax avoidance scheme in the space of a year.
But it's an easy play, isn't it?
I don't know if it is, mate.
On it.
I don't know. No. If he's got a problem with it, why didn't he stop his wife from doing it?
Well, because at the end of the day, she actually paid the tax that was due. But also, the easy win for him is to say, well, actually, look, non-dom status has been around under the Tories, it's been around under Labour. I now recognise what it is because of my background. I benefited from it, and I'm going to change it. It's an easy win.
I am loving this hour, actually, because everyone's coming up with really, really good suggestions. And because I'm such an anorak, I can see the flaws in them that you can't. How do you think the non-dom owner of the Daily Mail would greet this proposal from someone that they're currently being quite warm towards?
Oh, but look, I mean,
you said easy win, Rupert. I'm picking up on the easy here, not the win bit of it.
Easy win with the electorate, not an easy win with the Tory.
Do the electorate care that way? He's stealing Starmer's lunch again, because I think Starmer's already got his sights on non-doms, but he's not worried about getting the support of the Daily Mail because he's never going to get it.
No, but he's got to be radical, isn't he? Because he's got 2 years. They're probably going to be out for a decade. So he's got to say to those people, people who are supporting that non-dom status like the Daily Mail, well, look, we're in problems here. We're going to be out for a long time.
We've got to do so. Right. I mean, I'd love to see it. If we do, I shall give you the money myself, Rupert. That's the great.
Okay, thanks very much.
That's the great Les Dennis. Often said. Richie's in Colchester. Richie, what would you put at the top of the to-do list?
A points-based immigration system.
Oh, my God. It's like a ghost has come into the studio. I'm being haunted by the ghost of 2016. Right, listen, no pressure. What does that mean in plain English?
It means more staff for the NHS. It means
No, that's not points. What does points-based mean in plain English?
Right, okay. Well, yeah, okay. So I don't have the perfect answer for you, James.
No, I'll take any answer you've got, because otherwise you're just someone parroting the crud that came out of Nigel Farage's face for the last 10 years. What does it mean, mate?
Keir Starmer said it, didn't he, last week?
Well, I don't know what Keir Starmer means by it. I'm asking you.
Right, well, we have people come to the country based on what they can offer us, the skills that we need.
Right, so where does that leave social care and fruit picking?
All right, fair enough. You got me there, James.
Well, it's just one of those meaningless phrases, and if Starmer's using it, he's using it in the hope of appealing to people like you. And Richie, you deserve better than that, mate. You need to know.
Let me rephrase it.
What?
We need to get people back into the country.
Yeah, that's called immigration.
Yeah, but,
And in 2016, 17-point-something million people voted to stop it from happening.
Yes, and look at the mess we got now.
Well, fine. We part as friends, Richie, but you'll be coming on with political correctness next or telling me I'm woke. Theo, no noises from you. I get noises from you when I don't want them, and I don't get any noises when I do.
just tenterhooks.
I want a Chris Kamara moment.
Sorry.
That
was close.
Paul Merson in the car. Oh, my God, look, I can't believe it. It's not happened. Nothing, no announcements.
No, not yet.
Sanjay is in Richmond in North Yorkshire, which is the constituency of our new Prime Minister, Sanjay.
Hello, James. Good afternoon.
What would you like to say?
James, I just want to say a couple of things. One, how proud I am of the fact that Rishi is now our new PM, and also I'm so proud that he's my MP. As a British Indian who is an immigrant to this nation, it just shows the massive steps that we've taken, despite the fact that a lot of obstacles were put in his way to become PM.
Yes.
He's got a huge...
But by obstacles, you mean votes?
Yeah, votes, yes, by the Blue Rinse Brigade, who read a different narrative, who believed in Trussonomics, despite the fact that Rishi had plainly stated that this is all fantasy economics. And
yes, I agree with you. I mean, I've heard...
He read the runes.
Lots of people not sharing in your... sense of pride, but I respect it, actually, and I'm not going to lie to you. I'm quite moved by it.
I mean, from having come to this country in 1976, he stands on the shoulders of giants with those of us who've put up with racism, being called a Paki, being called wogs, having gone through.
Just a little. I'm going to apologise. I'm going to. No, I don't. I'm not going to fade you out. I just want to apologise for the use of those words, which was. Unfortunate, but in the context of this...
Sorry,
hang on, let me finish telling you off before you apologise for what you've just done. The reason I'm apologising for it, but respecting your use of those words, because these are words that were shouted at you and people like you and people like Rishi Sunak's parents and possibly him in the streets of this country well within living memory. So while they're not words that I would ordinarily broadcast or allow to be broadcast on the programme because of the offence that they continue to carry, I'm taking a judgment that in this context they were perfectly acceptable. But please don't repeat them. Please don't repeat them. Just tell me what needs to be at the top of his to-do list.
Top of his agenda is what he said. He needs to stabilise the economy. If he needs to increase taxes, then that we need to increase taxes.
Every caller is talking about increasing taxes. This is a Conservative Prime Minister, Sanjay.
Yeah. Listen. There's no such thing as a free meal.
Thank goodness.
You know, we all have to put into the pot in order to take something back out again. If national insurance.
I think you're right. I think you're right, and I think you're being rational, and I think you're being pragmatic, and I think he probably realises it more than most people in his party. But his party is full of people who don't. His party is full of people for whom some of the policies you describe, some of the obvious policies you describe, are pretty close to kryptonite. Thank you, Sanjay. My apologies again. Not for Sanjay, who is perfectly entitled to use those words, but just for what I suppose you call broadcasting standards. Those words still very, very loaded, but goodness knows the existence of those sentiments, as my friend and colleague Sangeeta Maiska discovered at the weekend, the existence of those sentiments is still undeniable. And if that caller that spoke so vilely to her at the weekend is to be believed, they exist well within the ranks of the Conservative Party. We've got 20 seconds left. No, make a noise.
A noise? It was close. We don't know it's close.
Sheila Fogarty. Did the microphones pick that up? I do hope not. It's bad enough. Go on.
Earlier you mentioned the Justice Secretary, Brandon Lewis.
Did I? I didn't. But let's pretend I did, because it sounds good. Go. Oh, yes, Brandon Lewis.
Brandon Lewis, Justice Secretary for the
Sheila!
You said make a noise. I'm just making a noise.
Watch this space. It may be that Brandon Lewis is on his way out.
Who did he sort of tie himself to, as it were?
He was a Liz Truss supporter, Boris Johnson supporter.
But Rob is coming back, so, you know, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away.
Rishi, he supported Rishi Sunak.
No, I know he did, but he was an absolute joke as Foreign Secretary, so...
Well, let's watch this.
For tomorrow's show, should we get Jeff Stelling in tomorrow and do Soccer Saturday?
Can Chris? Is it Chris who does the noises? Could he do like?
No, that Chris. No, Sheila Fogarty doing it. No, I don't want those sort of noises. I just wanted a kind of, oh my God, look what's happened in the Department of Justice.
You need a whoosh.
I don't need a whoosh.
You need a sky.
Right. Anyway, Sheila's here. We'll be back tomorrow at 2. 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 We'll be back tomorrow.